The COBIT 5 Foundation Certificate, Module 3, COBIT 5 Enablers, Lesson 5, Information. Welcome to Module 3, Lesson 5, where you'll learn about the Information Enabler. In this lesson, we'll study a number of topics, including the information cycle, the 6-layer information model, and the attributes used to assess information. The diagram on the screen shows the COBIT 5 Enabler model applied to information. You can see a number of practices that are specific to this enabler. We'll look at these in detail during the lesson. An Information Enabler Guide, similar to the Enabling Processes Guide, is under development. You can use the ISACA website to check on its availability. We'll begin by taking a look at the goals dimension of the enabler. COBIT 4 defines the 7 information criteria listed on the screen. These criteria can be mapped onto COBIT 5 enabler goals. We'll describe this mapping over the next few screens. Some of these criteria are quite complex and can be seen to consist of a number of other more specific qualities. For example, the quality of reliability includes ideas of believability, reputation, and objectivity. COBIT 5 has retained these criteria, but in a more granular form. We'll explore this in more detail later in the lesson. Now let's examine how each of the 7 COBIT 4 information criteria maps onto a COBIT 5 enabler goal. The first is effectiveness. This maps to information is effective if it meets the needs of the information consumer who uses the information for a specific task. If the information consumer can perform the task with the information, then the information is effective. This corresponds to the following information quality goals: appropriate amount, relevance, understandability, interpretability, objectivity. An obvious point here is that information serves some specific purpose. That's a fundamental attribute of information. You can see the more granular quality goals that effectiveness has been expanded to. The next of the COBIT 4 information criteria is efficiency. This maps to, whereas effectiveness considers the information as a product, efficiency relates more to the process of obtaining and using information, so it aligns to the information as a service view. If information that meets the needs of the information consumer is obtained and used in an easy way, i.e., it takes few resources, physical effort, cognitive effort, time, money, then the use of information is efficient. This corresponds to the following information quality goals: believability, accessibility, ease of operation, reputation. Integrity is the next of the COBIT 4 information criteria. This becomes, if information has integrity, then it is free of error and complete. It corresponds to the following information quality goals: completeness, accuracy. This provides a very clear illustration of the value of the COBIT 5 approach. Information can be complete but inaccurate, and it can be accurate but incomplete. Information should be judged on both of these qualities. Another of the COBIT 4 information criteria is reliability. This maps to, reliability is often seen as a synonym of accuracy. However, it can also be said that information is reliable if it is regarded as true and credible. Compared to integrity, reliability is more subjective, more related to perception, and not just factual. It corresponds to the following information quality goals: believability, reputation, objectivity. Availability is another of the COBIT 4 information criteria. It maps to, availability is one of the information quality goals under the accessibility and security heading. Availability relates to information being available for use when it is needed. The next of the COBIT 4 information criteria is confidentiality. This maps to confidentiality corresponds to the restricted access information quality goal. Confidentiality concerns ensuring that information can only be used by authorized persons. In an enterprise, this usually means use for a legitimate business purpose. The last of the COBIT 4 information criteria is compliance. This maps to compliance in the sense that information must conform to specifications is covered by any of the information quality goals, depending on the requirements. Compliance to regulations is most often a goal or requirement of the use of the information, not so much an inherent quality of information. Okay, so far in the lesson, you've learned about the goals of the information enabler and how they relate to COBIT 4 information criteria. The next topic is the information cycle, which is shown in the diagram on your screen. You can see that business processes, including IT processes, process and create data. Data, as you know, are simply discrete facts that in themselves have no meaning. As the diagram shows, information is created when data is put into context, possibly by bringing together a number of data items. For example, the time an incident was reported to an IT service desk is just a piece of data. But if we put that together with the time that the incident was resolved, then we can calculate a piece of information, the incident resolution time. By considering many incidents during a selected time period, we can calculate an even more valuable piece of information, the mean time to resolve incidents. The next transformation shown in the diagram is creating knowledge from information. Knowledge is created by analyzing information in the context of the enterprise. Staying with our service desk, for example, by tracking mean incident resolution times, we will acquire knowledge of any trends or patterns. Perhaps performance drops at particular times of year. This knowledge creates value by supporting decision-making or other plans for future action to improve performance. The next topic in the lesson is the information model proposed in COBIT 5. The model is constructed in 6 layers, each of which has its own set of attributes or characteristics. It's important that you remember these for the exam. The diagram on your screen illustrates these layers. We'll look at the attributes of each one over the next 6 screens. The bottom layer is the physical world layer. COBIT describes this as the world where all phenomena that can be empirically observed take place. Put more simply, this world is where information is physically captured, processed, stored, and transmitted. An example of an attribute from this layer is the information carrier or medium. For example, paper documents, the spoken word, and various electronic means. The layer above the physical layer is the empiric layer. COBIT defines this as the empirical observation of the signs used to encode information and their distinction from each other and from background noise. The modern enterprise is awash with information, data, and other signals. Only information has a role in the execution of the activities of the enterprise, or in its decision-making. The rest is just noise. But a piece of information has a specific purpose and context. It is relevant to a particular activity or decision process. Outside of that context, it is just noise. Attributes at the empiric layer distinguish information from noise and provide a granular view of information that allows it to be related to a context. An example attribute is the information access channel. This identifies the access channel of the information. We are not thinking here of a physical medium, but of, for example, a user interface. The next layer is the syntactic layer. COBIT describes this as the rules and principles for constructing sentences in natural or artificial languages. Syntax refers to the form of information. Attributes at the syntactic layer describe how information is presented. Common methods include tables, reports, graphs, and dashboards. An example of an attribute at the syntactic layer is code or language. This identifies the representational language or format used for encoding the information and the rules for combining the symbols of the language to form syntactic structures. Above the syntactic layer is the semantic layer. COBIT describes this as the rules and principles for constructing meaning out of syntactic structures. Semantics refers to the meaning of information. This is best explained by giving you some examples. Information type. This identifies the kind of information. For example, the information may be financial or non-financial. Information currency. This identifies the time horizon referred to by the information. For example, it might relate to the last financial year or the current one. Information level. This identifies the granularity of the information, such as daily, weekly, monthly, and so on. The next layer of the information model is the pragmatic layer. COBIT describes this as the rules and structures for constructing larger language structures that fulfill specific purposes in human communication. Pragmatics refers to the use of information. Examples of pragmatic attributes include retention period, how long information can be retained before it is destroyed or disposed of. Information status, identifies whether the information is operational or historical. Novelty, identifies whether the information tells us something new or confirms something we already know. Contingency, identifies the information that is required to precede this information, for it to be considered as information. The sixth and final layer of the information model is the social world layer. COBIT describes this as the world that is socially constructed through the use of language structures at the pragmatic level of semiotics. For example, contracts, law, culture. An example of an attribute at this level is context. This identifies the context in which the information makes sense, is used, or has value. For example, a process or organizational structure. Before we go on to the next topic, let's just summarize what we've learned about the 6-layer information model. Physical world layer. Technology and media for storage and distribution, etc. Empiric layer. Identify and distinguish information. Syntactic layer. The form of information. Semantic layer. The meaning of information. Pragmatic layer. The use of information. Social world layer. The context of use. Okay. We've introduced and described the information model. Now let's look at how it can be used. We're going to look at 3 examples. Using the model to specify information requirements. Using the model to determine the level of protection required for information. And using the model to review the information. Let's use an exercise to think about how the information model can be used when developing a new application. Aim to spend 20 minutes on this exercise, and don't forget to check out your study guide for a solution. How might you use the information model to assist with the specifications of a new application and the associated information or data models? Consider each of the 6 layers. Our second example of a practical application of the information model is using it to determine the level of protection required by some information. Aspects to consider include At the physical layer, how and where is the information stored? Is it stored centrally on a secure storage device? Or is it stored on a desktop computer? Or on a laptop? Or in the cloud? Is the location appropriate for the value of the information? Or its level of confidentiality? At the empiric layer, what are the access channels to the information? Are the channels password protected? What is the nature of the password protection? How many people can access the information? At the semantic layer, what type of information is it? Is the information current or does it relate to the past? And at the pragmatic layer, how long must the information be retained? Is the information operational or historic? Our last example of applying the information model is using it to review existing information. Such a review will usually be done within the context of the business process supported by the information. In this case, the information quality criteria that you learned about at the start of the lesson provide a useful framework for the review. For example, availability. Is information available when it is needed? Is it produced or delivered on time? Completeness. Is existing information complete? Or do users have to get additional information from elsewhere? Or maintain their own information? Appropriate amount of information. A common issue is that reports continue to be produced long after the need for them has disappeared. That completes this lesson on the Information Enabler. In this lesson, you learned about information quality attributes, the information cycle, and the 6 layers. We've studied some complex concepts in this lesson that are important for your exam. Why not take some time to update your study notes before you move on? Don't forget, you can contact a tutor if you've got any questions. The next lesson is Module 3, Lesson 6. In that lesson, we'll study the Services, Infrastructure and Applications Enabler.